right. Welcome to our Easier Habits live series where I'm Alex Sorensen. I'm a business coach. I'm helping Meg Sorensen, my wife, ramp up her business. A quick recap of the story thus far. Meg is rebuilding her business after some health issues. She has typically relied on word of mouth, which is very common for solopreneurs, especially service-based solopreneurs, consultants, etc. And so the challenge there is figuring out some kind of regular system to fill up your client base with your ideal clients at your ideal rate.
Yeah, and the specific thing with the ideal client there is I am making a little bit of a pivot, whereas before I was working with a really wide range of different types of clients. Now I would really like to focus on one thing. It would be really nice.
Yeah, well, and that's great business-wise, right?
Yeah.
Focusing on a niche so you know where to target, etc. And that is one thing we talked a lot about last week, a couple of different recent approaches for targeting that ideal client. And so there's one less functional approach, or it's experimental, it hasn't paid off yet, but we were reaching out to global relocation managers, etc., to see if we can, strike up a long-term relationship with a company, and that might be a source of clients. That still might be helpful, and it's something to keep on the back burner. But where you've already had some success is doing activities at social media groups.
Yeah.
The way you've been doing that hasn't filled up your roster, and it's kind of difficult to do that quickly.
Yeah, but it's definitely making strides towards that.
Right, strides towards that. So there's two things we can do about that. We can expand the number of groups you're interacting with to multiply it, but as we talked about a little bit last week, then you have to multiply your efforts. And so now we're going to try and figure out a little bit more strategically how to engage people in those groups, and probably today we'll talk more about engaging them online electronically, but you also have an opportunity at the end of this week to go to a conference where you can engage people in person. So this week we'll probably spend some time on that as well.
Definitely.
All right, so before we dive into it, the communication tip of the day.
Yay! So if there's something that you want to be really comfortable saying, whether it's your elevator pitch, a personal introduction, or talking about a product that you sell or worked on, you need to practice a lot. When I was studying Japanese, or at least after I studied Japanese, I still couldn't speak it very well. And so after I graduated, I made a point of, whenever I heard someone speaking Japanese, I'd kind of be like, Nihonjin desu ka? Which means, are you Japanese? And they would be all surprised and they would ask me questions. But I had the exact same conversation. I cannot count how many times where they asked me, why did I speak Japanese? What was I doing? Why was my interest such that it kind of inspired me to do that? And I had that same conversation so many times, it became really easy. And I didn't have to think about it anymore. And so when you're going from really thinking about what you say to wanting it to be automatic, repetition is key. So even if you're talking to an empty room, that's something that you'll want to do if you want the automaticity.
And to plug coaching a little bit, right? That is an opportunity where, especially with speaking, you get to speak with someone who will actually give you feedback and quality feedback.
Feedback is my point for tomorrow.
Oh, sorry, stole it. We can dive into that. But there's so many reasons why it's like that helps you, and also keeps you accountable for practicing in between coaching sessions. Because they can follow up with you.
They can help you with what to practice and when to switch what you're practicing, and all of that.
So yeah, there's a lot of power there in a coaching relationship. I have lived abroad multiple times, and I sometimes been better at practicing the language than others, but it is like I always notice if you're a typical expat abroad, you're surrounding yourself with other people like you and often speaking in your native language a lot. So you can even be in the foreign country and find ways to avoid practicing. And so it really has to be intentional.
Very much so.
A coach can help you gently shove you out of your comfort zone.
Gently shove. I like that. Gently shove. I'm going to get you out there.
All right. But thinking about the coach value proposition, one of the things we discussed in terms of engaging online in general, and this can be different, this can be tailored for specific groups, but a general strategy is thinking about your content in terms of 3 buckets of ways to engage people. So there's going to be content that you just post online to attract people's attention. And it's kind of like name familiarity. And this stuff you want to be small, you want to be bite-sized, you don't want to put tons and tons of repeated effort into this content because it's not necessarily directly going to result in a sale. You basically kind of go for volume, and then stuff that is really high value that you still actually might want to give away for free, you want to put that in another bucket, which is lead magnet. Basically something, the common way you do this is you have some kind of like worksheet or free resource, but they have to sign up for your email list for this. And so this is something that's good enough that it actually, it promises to solve a specific problem usually, and but usually still free, but requires some engagement. Yeah. And then the third stuff is stuff that you would actually sell. So if you acquire an email list or people joining your online group, etc., then this is the offer of a product, and you can have the same kind of topic in each area. You could have a little snippet about improving your language practice. That's just general. You can have like a worksheet, like a free PDF workbook for logging your practice hours or something like that, that they have to join your email list or group, etc. for. And then, to that group, you can then, for instance, advertise structured, one-on-one feedback sessions for their practice or whatnot.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff in there.
So the question is, I think we can start with like topics. What are you offering? What problems are you solving? And then we can kind of, as we discuss each topic, maybe we can think through like, what does that look like as like post? What does that look like as a lead magnet? And what does that look like as actual like business offer?
Yeah. So what I do is I have to put this in nice words now. I connect people to global experiences. So for most people, English is the language of business. It's the language of the internet. More than half of the content online is in English, despite only like 10% of the world being native English speakers. But there is a huge number of people who are second language learners, right? So this is to connect those people with those English speakers, or connect native English speakers to those people in a way that they'll be able to communicate. But I do that through, again, through this coaching methodology of helping people to practice the right things in the right way for them. And as I do that, I open up their opportunities, or I help them open up their opportunities. Because when you can communicate with more people, then you can learn more, you can sell more, you can travel more. There's whatever it is that you want to do with that, you can do it more. So there's a lot of confidence as well as skill that goes into kind of all of that.
Yeah. So that's like a big overview.
Yeah, big overview.
I don't know, for instance, what particular niche that would be attracted to. And particularly, for instance, you mentioned playing like both sides of this, native English speakers to non-native English speakers and vice versa. So like just for focus, right? Yes. Niching down, who's your niche?
So focusing down, I am focusing on entrepreneurs who want to go global with their product. I don't know if I want to be so specific as to say Japanese entrepreneurs, but I kind of do, because
that's where we're starting. We have several Japanese specific groups, so you might as well try it.
Yeah.
And like you can always broaden out, but typically like the more specific you can make your niche, then you know how to talk directly to them.
Yes.
And when you say things like, and this is the advice I hear over and over and over again, and I'll admit I'm not a marketing expert, but this is what the experts say. I do more product development. But marketing experts, continually say, like, one, if you look at people who become very successful and fill multiple niches, they almost always started really serving one very specific niche. You see that pattern over and over again. So, like, don't try and directly imitate rich people. Like, imitate how they started. Okay. And then also specifically with marketing materials, the most power you're going to get from your offering is when someone sees themselves in their offer.
Yeah.
So like if you say like, I am connecting you as a native or non-native English speaker to global opportunities. I'm like, okay.
It's a little too vague. Yeah.
I don't know where I'm seeing myself. It's kind of like, the average family with 2.2 kids. And I'm like, oh no, I don't have 2.2 kids, right?
Is it still 2.2? I thought we were down to like 1.7.
We may be, but when I was a kid, that was the joke or whatever, 2.5 maybe. But
that 4.5 child.
Yeah, exactly. And so the idea is like, it's much better to say like an average family of 2 people, and then like you are talking specifically to that that individual, than a general offer that doesn't quite apply to anybody.
That makes sense.
Right? And there's still some people who be like, well, okay, I have, I only have 1 kid, but I still really want what you have. Or I have 3, but like this still applies to me. Like there are people who still do that. But like when you say 2.5, everybody has to do that.
Yeah.
Right? And so like that's the different, like the power of getting specific. So Japanese entrepreneurs who want to take their business to a global audience, like we still haven't even necessarily geographically niched down, right? Because entrepreneurs who are here and interacting regularly still could be a very different niche than entrepreneurs who are primarily in Japan and don't have as much interaction, right? Like even that could be niched down a little bit more.
Yeah, that's true.
Just for the sake of this, like we're forming, and one of the things that helps with this is form a specific user avatar. It's not like a demographic, it's a person. And again, not everyone has to fit all aspects of that avatar, but that will help you get really specific. So if we're thinking about like your user avatar is, give your user avatar a name.
Misaki, I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, I guess Misaki.
Misaki, man or woman?
Man.
Okay, so male, living in Japan?
When I think about it, like, I'd love someone who is living in the States, but when I think about it, I always envision someone in Japan.
Yeah. And your current clients, are they?
Mostly in Japan. So.
All right. So, okay. Yeah. So, man in Japan has a business, wants to take it global. Are they necessarily the business owner?
Good question. See, this is the kind of stuff that I need. I like this.
That's a plug for business coaching. This is what you get.
Right? No, I'm going to say they are the one responsible for global outreach. So sometimes if it's a if it's a solopreneur, yes, that will be the owner. But if it's at kind of a small company, then they'll have a very specific, like, that is their job. That's
a good thing to be aware of. That's a demographic statement of like a range of people, but for Misaki, he has to be one of those. That's the power of like a specific user avatar. Yeah. So many people don't actually go through thinking this specifically, but as an exercise, it will be so much easier to figure out how to help him, like what specific obstacles Misaki has when we've specified all of this out.
Okay, awesome. So now I'm thinking, is Misaki a boy or a girl's name? So I'm going to have to change it to Kazu because I know Kazu is a boy.
All right, Kazu.
Kazu. His name is Kazu. Okay, so Kazu is a solopreneur. He is the head of his company.
Okay, so Japanese, solopreneur, male. We could get into age.
I'm going to say 40s, late 40s.
Okay, late 40s. All right. And that will bring up like all sorts of what kinds of educations in English was he getting in the 40s, right? That might be different than the sorts of education and opportunities in English that, he has now. All right. So now we have like a very specific idea. And we could get more specific. What kind of product is he selling in his business?
He is selling, traditional Japanese tea. Like matcha.
Okay, so it's a physical product is one aspect of that, but there's also like a branding, like Japanese experience. And here's where I can see the communication starting to come in, where you, like someone who wants to buy tea, especially like imported tea or tea that costs more, right? You're going to want a story around that. You're going to want, I mean, if I'm thinking about it, like, all of the ads I've seen, from like in the 90s or whatever, before it became ubiquitous, Kikkoman soy sauce
Oh
or
my
other
gosh,
stuff,
yeah,
right? Like, you know, there's like family tradition or whatever, but you know, there's a story behind that, and people have certain preconceptions about Japanese people and ancient practices, which may or may not hold, but like, regardless, like, you've seen this in the past, and that's probably what's worked for people, is like having a strong story. So one of the things, you know, you are going to have to help Kazu with is the you know, telling that Japanese story, that they're buying into a Japanese experience, not just the tea, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So but I'm kind of like feeding you topics. I think now we've thought like very specifically through who Kazu is. What kind of obstacles does he have to expanding his market into an English speaking?
So it would be lack of confidence in English. He
like,
has...
Where specifically does he feel unconfident? Like, what are the situations?
Well, he knows his English isn't perfect. And so when giving presentations, he's so focused on accuracy of language that he isn't able to say what he wants. And because he can't say what he wants, that kind of spirals into... you know, oh, no one's going to want to buy this, and so then maybe I shouldn't even do this presentation. Maybe it's just easier to stay within Japan.
All right, yeah, putting off presentation. Who's he presenting to?
Distributors. I'm going to say distributors in India, distributors in Australia, distributors in the US. He has a bunch of ideas of how he wants to kind of expand his business. But yeah, that even getting kind of to that point where he feels comfortable presenting, that's kind of his biggest thing. So,
I mean, that, like, who they're presenting to is going to change unless, you know, you are specifically targeting only tea entrepreneurs, right? Or Japanese lifestyle entrepreneurs or whatever, people who have, like, physical products on the shelves, which, you know, is, like, if you're really business savvy and really good at networking, you probably could do that. Like, you know, to really, like, blow people's minds about, like, niching down. Like, you could absolutely niche down there. You know, I've pitched myself to, like, overthinking entrepreneurs, which is still too broad. But this idea of, like, all right, now we know, like, that's a very specific cause, and you can think through, like how he's interacting, like, where's he working from?
You mean, well,
like, where does he do his work? Does he work from home? Does he have, like, office space? Like, how does the Japanese solopreneur life go?
Yeah, I'm gonna say work from home.
All right. So yeah, you could see him in his, like, home office, his computer. You can, you know, imagine the, you know, Japanese room or whatever. They tend to be smaller, more cluttered or whatever, but you can see him, like, at his computer researching places to distribute, and then, you know, thinking, like, oh, I'll never get that.
Yeah. Right?
You can, like, envision that specifically. And there's a lot around, like, marketing. Like, all right, how do we target him? If he's researching distributors, or, like, you know, you could target entrepreneurs or, like, people who are in Japan who are researching distribution, right? Right? Like, there's all sorts of marketing opportunities that come out of this. We're not focusing on that, like, primarily. We're focusing just on the topic, but that just kind of shows the power of getting down to, like, the specific kazu.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's that pitch, telling your story, selling a premium brand to distributors, collaborators. I mean, actually, you've also worked in entertainment, and that's kind of similar, actually. You're pitching to distributors, even though it's a non-physical product. So that's a big thing, is pitching your company to a distributor. What are other challenges he has to going global?
So not only does he have to get the buy-in from the distributors, but then he's going to have to work with them down the line as, you know, he, you know, deals with, like, shipping and with, if he, and some of this, like, I, you know, I'm like, well, when it gets, you know, so big and he's got so much stuff and it needs to, like, hire somebody to help him or something like that. So, I think part of the idea, or I guess he would need to know how to scale that up in English, how to do the contracts with these people in English, how to make sure he knows what he's signing. Obviously, you know, solopreneurs don't have to do everything by themselves. You can hire somebody to do some of that for you. But being able to find the right people, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. So, yeah, logistics in general is the broad category. Logistics in English.
Yeah.
Right? And there's, like, specific fulfillment things in there, marketing and branding in English.
Yep.
Like, again, he might not create all of the website, but he has to be able to tell his story. And even if he's hiring someone to do it in English, he has to be able to guide them to effective copy and make sure they're hitting the right parts of the story. And there's plenty of people who are native English speakers who could build a website who aren't necessarily good storytellers.
Yeah.
Right? And so he has to be good enough at understanding how to market and brand himself in English to be able to guide that. So so I think, the English marketing, English logistics.
Being able to go to conferences and things like that, and networking.
Networking to find these partners.
Yeah.
All right, so those are several areas, and probably, to be honest, like, you could niche down into like one of these areas potentially, or focus on one of these areas. But one of the things that posting on social media can do is it gives you an opportunity to post content in all of these topics and see where the most interest is, right? Is it the pitch? Is it the networking?
Yeah.
Chances are the networking is going to be highly seasonal, right? Before a conference or something, right? Like, it's not going to be on their time. It's evergreen. Is it seasonal in a way that you could predict it, where there's certain conferences a lot of people go, or you focus on an industry, maybe like, Japanese entertainment, Japanese, whatever, physical products or whatever that would go, like, where they would talk to distributors, in getting store space, etc. So, and maybe those have big conferences. So you could predictably tell, like, all right, this big conference is in a couple months for this industry. I'm going to target Japanese people who are searching for that conference with a specific, like, networking white paper course, etc. But, all right, so we have the big topics. We have the pitch to distributors, we have logistics, we have networking, we have marketing, English marketing. So, like, all sorts of different topics. You could brainstorm more, but I think that's a good one to start with. Let's pick one of those and kind of walk through it, like the different levels of what the content would look like. Which one do you just intuitively feel is like has the most interest from your experience?
I'm gonna go with networking.
Networking. All right. So, networking. All right. What does that look like as a post?
What do you mean?
Like, if you're just going to post something that interests people, that, like, invites them to connect to you or know who you are, it's just kind of like marketing. Like, it's a post, short blog article, whatever, like, short piece of content people consume just for free. Would be valuable, but, like, you could also, like, relatively low-hanging fruit. You could produce it pretty easily.
That's a good question. I mean, I'm thinking like Instagram post or, something like that, but it's,
Does Kazu use Instagram?
Yes.
Okay.
And Facebook. Japanese people in business tend to very frequently use both of those.
All right. Awesome.
And Twitter. Not necessarily LinkedIn. So it would be probably a kind of like an Instagram story looking thing where I want to kind of show the discomfort that Japanese people have when attempting to, like, enter a group of non-Japanese people.
This could even be like a case study, like you've seen.
Yes,
this
I've seen
at
this.
Conferences,
I've
right?
seen this so many times, and so that's what I want to show people.
Okay.
Like, would you actually, enter this group? How comfortable would you be talking about your product, your service, your green tea with this group? And then, like, showing them, okay, well, if you're not, then I can help you do that, right? I can put you in there. And so, like, here's a big group of people, and then, kind of thinking about you, and then showing, like, a placeholder of you among those people or something like that.
Yeah. So, it could be, and there's, we'll get into this a little bit more in the tip. There's, like, you could take that same thing, like that networking thing, and think of many types of things, like you listicles, what to do to prepare to network, or case study, like a personal story. Like there's all sorts of genres, And I guess after I edit this video, I'll probably like link to some articles that kind of give you that idea of like different types of posts you can make. But yeah, so you take that topic. An example is a case study. Like this is you know, either someone doing it wrong, or like a personal case study, someone you've helped. You could contrast the two, etc. There's lots of room to maneuver. But you have a post. All right, so imagine someone lands on that post. And they're interested, but they need more preparation than just that post. They want more from you. Like, what kind of lead magnet might you offer them?
Okay.
Like, and this is specifically, it's going to be something that helps them solve like a networking specific problem, since the topic is networking.
All right. Lead magnet would be a sheet with, I don't know, 20 ways to start a conversation in networking.
Yeah, so 20 conversation starters, right? There could be several, and this is kind of like where you would A/B test. You could have like a checklist, like a self-evaluation. I think these are underutilized. There was someone who did, who does drawing courses, and I'm not a very good artist, but I do draw occasionally and try and get better. But I had never seen this before, and it was instantly attractive to me, which was like an art self-evaluation to help you identify where you are in art, right? Nice. So you could have like a self-evaluation, like
where you are,
your readiness and what you'll need to like, and you'll point you in general, right, to where you need to go to work on, or what kind of skills you might need to work on,
that
right?
Makes sense, yeah.
So like, you know, can you introduce yourself and who you are without having to think about it? Kind of going back to your first thing, like, right? Do you have your like 1 or 2 sentence elevator pitch about who you are? Is that like automatic?
Yeah.
Well, if not, just, you know, translate that, you know, get a native English speaker's feedback on it and practice that so that you can think about the interaction rather than just the English as you introduce yourself.
I like that, yeah.
Right?
For sure.
And then you can have a couple other like self-assessments or whatever, you know, like checklist or items, right? So there's things like that. So like a free like worksheet, you know, a list of tips or practical things people can use, a self-assessment, depending on, you know, more academic, if you know, environments or whatever, you could have like research. Sometimes I see like, you know, market research as a lead magnet for certain companies that are targeting business owners. So it could be, it could be a report on how people, like successful Japanese networkers, like here's like the research I've done on successful, like, you know, non-native English speaking Japanese networkers. I mean, that's probably a little bit harder to sell, but what I'm thinking is like with distribution. Yeah. Like, for sure. You know, here's my report on American distributors that carry a lot of Japanese products. And like, you know, and maybe some, you know, talk to people, interview them, have a few case studies or whatnot. Like that, like that's a lot more in depth than a blog article. Definitely. It's eminently useful, like that kind of research, who to contact, how to contact them, etc. You know, depending on, you know, how far you want to go into this, you could like reach out to the companies and like talk to somebody who handles these and just like ask for them advice, so, like advice from the company itself on how to talk to them, might give them confidence. Anyway, sorry, brainstorming, which I love to do on content. So you know, these are all sorts of ideas for the lead magnet stage. And then what would be the offer for networking?
The offer for networking, I mean, would be coaching for sure. One-to-one coaching to prepare for a specific event or something like that. And so I could do like a 3-month package, you know, or like a 12 session something for yeah. So
a 3-month preparation for that, right? And specifically, you want to be adding value they're not getting or couldn't get from a white paper or whatever. So like the 7 tips that or the 7 phrases to introduce yourself. Yeah. What are they not going to be able to get from, like, you give absolutely as much value as you can in the PDF, but what are they not going to get from a PDF?
The understanding of how to use those and when to use which ones and the confidence to actually use them, and the practice in using them, right? So you know what it is, but then if you don't have practice actually, you know, using them in an authentic experience, they might, you know, try one and completely bomb or something like that.
Yeah, so using that, I mean, I think answering questions, right? A PDF like can kind of do that, but it's not the same as like being able to answer questions in a conversation.
Yeah.
Right? So answer questions about yourself. Making small talk with someone is something you can't do entirely on a PDF sheet, because your follow-up questions will depend on you understanding their answer and being able to navigate that. So like, I mean, being able to have a conversation not only where you express what, who you are, but you help the other person feel like that's a real relationship and they feel listened to, because that would be hard. I'm not sure. I know my Japanese is not a level where like, I think, a Japanese person walking away from my conversation would feel like they were understood and had a connection. Right?
Yeah. That's interesting.
So these are all kind of specific points. Like, and one of the ways you can think about this, right, is like, all right, your lead magnet gets them, it solves the problem of like, what do I say when I walk up to them? What do I say for this carefully prescribed, like these very common things, like, where are you from? What do you do? Why are you here at this conference? Right? Like there's some things that you could anticipate, right?
Yeah.
But you can't follow up and make it feel natural, and like making sure the conversation, like how to guide a conversation to making a lasting connection.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Like maybe the white sheet cues you up for how to start a conversation, but I mean, not to be mercenary, but like part of the reason you go to a business convention and start conversations is because you want to create relationships.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? And I think if you're doing it well, you're creating a relationship where you're offering something as well as asking for something. But like, yeah, how to create relationships and follow up, that could be a corollary. So you kind of ask yourself like, all right, what are all the problems they're having in this interaction? And we focused on like just stepping up to that conversation.
Yeah.
But like there is planning accommodations, like scheduling. Are you meeting up with other people around that? Is there like, something I started trying to do at a conference, right? Is trying to like find other people who are going to the same conference.
Yeah.
So like I have some connections, or, might meet up with them on one of the days or something like that. Especially because, I mean, even in English, I get anxious about networking and whatnot. So if I can already find some interesting people that I'd like to meet up with at lunch on a certain day or something like that, figure out a way to like organize that or whatnot. Like, anyway, so, you can think of like setting up in your hotel room or navigating the space. There's, feeling comfortable in the space. What are there's all sorts of other things you could do. And so thinking about all of the problems they have, and you can focus it in one area, like that conversation, and then drill down in that area, like making your introduction, making small talk, pitching yourself, how to follow up with people, etc. Like different things. How to feel confident asking for someone to repeat themselves, or like that.
Asking for clarification,
right?
Stuff,
So you can break down all of that. And so there's a ton of content, even in networking, right? With all those problems. And, some of those easy tips, like, you could have a listicle of 5 ways to start a conversation at a networking event in English. You could have a white paper, which is like, here are things to practice, or a self-assessment, right? And then you can have like, hey, if you're not feeling confident, if you want to work on these hard things that you can't learn from a PDF, i.e. how to answer questions, how to follow up, etc., then, here's a 3-month program that I have workshopping. So that's an example. This is kind of a longer session, but I hope, because we're outlining a lot of stuff, but I hope this gives you a framework for like content development.
Very much so, actually. And I'm attending a conference this week and next week. And so like there's all of these things in my mind that I'm like, okay, let's see, I'm going to use that, I'm going to use this. And so if I can have some of that set up before I go, then I can easily direct people to that when I meet them.
I think for this situation, we can talk about this more. This has been a longer one. We can talk about this more in tomorrow and the day after, in terms of that. Like, thinking in terms of white paper would be probably a really good way to go, like capture email addresses and start an email list. So like the lead magnet is probably a good way to go. You can also mention your products or sales or whatever, but you don't have to worry about like the posting content. That's you having conversations as the post, right? So you can kind of like skip that initial step. But it might be helpful to have like not all the white papers, but like think of one specific offer.
Okay.
And it's going to be slightly different probably because these are now people who have gone to a conference. And so you're kind of thinking of what's their next step for that white paper. Like how to follow up with your contacts that you make here. That's extremely relevant.
Yes.
Everyone's going to have to do that.
Yeah.
How to lead into like making a connection with someone, how to get someone's information, and how to follow up.
Definitely.
Like everyone's going to be doing that.
And if they're not, then it's kind of a waste of
yeah, exactly, a waste of that. So it's going to be on people's minds. Like the goal for them is they hope they have valuable contacts that they can keep up with, right? And so if you're offering them something to do that in the space where they're thinking about that, that will be particularly powerful.
Awesome.
All right, so we'll talk about that more. The business tip, I kind of already dived into that because I knew we were talking about content. I will add a link below in the video where essentially, so we have a topic. You can explode that by thinking about your specific person and like the specific circumstances they're in, what kind of like issues they have, and there's going to be a ton of problems. And within a problem, you could probably break that down into sub-problems. So you'll have like, even within a single topic, you will have a lot of potential problems to that you could do just like a little tip with here and there, or you can combine several of them into a white paper or an offering, etc. And then when you combine all of those problems with different approaches to writing an article, so like a personal story, anti-practices, especially when it's something people do a lot or think is a good thing to do, a great post is saying like why this is counterproductive, or a one weird tip, one weird strategy, right? Like people...
Clickbait.
I mean, but people are always curious, right?
Yeah.
Like, is there something that works really well that they're not even aware about? But like listicles, case studies, anyway. So when you combine that, like breaking a topic down into problems, sub-problems, and listicles, you can get like easily an idea for hundreds of posts, and then go ahead and schedule them, because you can visit the same problem from several different angles, right?
Sure.
You could have a listicle, 7 things to do when you introduce yourself, a case study of what to do when you introduce yourself, what most people do, and this one weird trick that works a whole lot better than the average approach to introducing yourself, like, right? And so that multiplies the amount of content you can do. So you might think like, what do I have to post? Well, this is kind of a framework that can help you generate lots of content and then reuse that. And then when you combine that with the fact that you could repost other people's posts and just comment on it, and you can repost some stuff you did from last year or whatnot, like this will like give you tons of stuff that you can work through. So that's my business tip, is think through your topic to problems to sub-problems and multiple ways of expressing or addressing that sub-problem, and you will have more content than you know what to do with. Your biggest problem will be what is highest priority, what to test first.
Yep.
So, all right, we have construction,
Woo-hoo!
so we must leave. So thank you for showing up. Talk to you later. Bye.